He lived in a nice room on the Place de Beffroi, in the company of a young woman, of whom I know only the first name. Louise ordered to remain silent and immobile in the corner whenever he welcomed me there. At 5 o'clock she would serve tea, and by the way of thanks, he would kiss her hand. One has to imagine that he had no sexual relation with her and was happy to merely lie next to her in the same bed. In fact, that's how he claimed he liked to behave. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Have a seat, take it easy. Today we're going to talk about the actual creator of Surrealism. Not André Breton, but his friend, Jacques Vaché. This video will be a look into Jacques' life before the war, during the war, and after the war. And we will also look into his war letters, which had an immense influence on Surrealism. I will be taking a lot of inspiration from a very good website, jacquesvaché.fr. They do a biography on his life, they have his war letters, and there's a book about Jacques called Fuck la Mort. With no further ado, let's get into it. Jacques was born September 7th, 1895. His father, James Samuel Vaché, was an artillery captain with English heritage. So made it so he had a bit of a military insight from an early age, but he also traveled a lot, for example to Indochina. But they settled for real in Nantes, and here is where Jacques would spend most of his life. The year is 1910. Nantes is being harassed by 4 proto-surrealists: Pierre Bisserier, Eugène Hublet, Jean Bellemare, and Jacques Vaché. They call themselves the Brotherhood of Pranksters, the SARS. This group would spend a lot of time before the war together, where most of them got their cultural and artistic inspiration from. They published a magazine called En route mauvaise troupe. It would get them their 50 seconds of fame, where local newspapers start writing about the story, about what they wrote, and it will get them expelled by the school. A synopsis of the magazine: they proclaimed their independence of mind, their freedom of criticism, and their hatred of the bourgeoisie. Conventions in the army. The students of St. Cyr were outraged. The press seized on the affair. Revenge against the Germans and the massacre of entire generations were being prepared. The magazine was inspired by a poem from Paul Verlaine with the same name. On the road, bad troop. Go, my lost children. These leashes were due to you. The chimera stretches out its rump. There is quite a lot with just the SARS, that there are multiple books you can read about. But for this story, we're going to jump to the war. August 1914. The boys were split. Jean Bellemare managed to avoid the war and will be spending his time in Paris, pursuing his theatrical career. But Bessières, Hublet, and Vaché, they were conscripted. Hublet died during the war in 26 October 1916. Bessières, because he had education within medicine, would be a military nurse, and he would die after the war in 1930. And he also had a severe morphine addiction. In December of 1914, he started his training in Brest, but in 1915 he got sick and got to spend some time in isolation because he was quarantined in Ille-et-Tiburon, which is in modern-day Brittany. Basquiat Jacques, 19th line soldier, 20 years old, comes from the main Navy hospital in Brest. Date of entry, February 19th, 1915. Date of discharge, April 16th, 1915. Nature of the illness, Blenmoric orchitis or gonorrheic orchitis. Days in infirmary, 44A. Days in hospital, 21, total 21. Designation upon discharge, RSS. Return to service, observation, none. Jacques was sent to the front in Somme as part of the 64 Infantry Regiment. But one thing he really wanted to do, also because he was an Anglophile, he wanted to become an interpreter, and he was allowed to do that at a later point. But before becoming an interpreter, he was hospitalized again between 1915 and early 1916. There was a lot more writings from this hospitalization than the last. It was during a charge where a bag of grenades exploded and injured his legs. He had to have surgery because of this injury. And luckily, because of his father, he was actually sent to a bit of a different hospital where his aunt was a nurse. And he could also undergo a second operation. But of course, most importantly, he gets to meet 2 very important people: André Breton and Theodore Frankl. They met shortly after the second surgery, and they also have been semi-acquaintance in Nantes before, but this was the first time they really could understand and talk to one another. So the three of them got along really well, and the three of them started writing to one another. It's now April 1916, and Jacques gets placed in different British and American divisions, but most of this time he worked as an interpreter, which gave him a lot of time to write for André and Theodore. There's 17 war letters. To read them all will take a long time, so I'm not doing that. I'll take different tidbits from different letters to give you an idea of the mindset and ideas that came from these war letters. November 1916 to André Breton. What a hole, what a hole, what a hole! It always confuses me for a moment that this individual who lived there for a lifetime, well, hello to my neighbors, the stonemasons, and the Polish people. Jacques Tristan Haler. July the 5th, 1916. But still, what a life. I have naturally no one to talk to, no books to read, no time to paint. In short, terribly isolated. I say, Mr. Interpreter, will you, pardon the road to, have a cigarette, sir? Supply train, inhabitants, mayor, lodging tickets, a shell that affirms, and rain, 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 rain. 200 motor trucks in a row, in a row, in a row. In total, I'm seized with dreadful boredom. Just see the above, of things of no interest. For fun, I imagine the English are in reality Germans, and I am in the front with them. I certainly smoke a little Tufeni. This officer in Her Majesty's service will transform himself into a winged Adrogain and dance the vampire dance, drooling milky tea, and then I will wake up at a familiar bed, and I will go and unload boats, with you besides me. I now seriously ask you to write to me. Mr. Vaché, interpreter. I greet the Polish people according to their rights, and I will give you the memory of Jacques Tristan Haler. To André Breton, October 11th, 1916. I am an interpreter for the English, and I bring there to total indifference and horned with a peaceful smoke screen, which I like to bring to official matters. I walk from ruins to villages with my crystal monocule and a theory of disturbing paintings. I have successfully been crowned writer, a famous pornographic cartoonist, a scandalous cubist painter. I stay at home and I leave it to others to explain and discuss my personality. Moreover, I imagine being in the German army and succeeding there. That changes, and I have to come to certainty of serving against the Allied forces. What do you want? I am going on a leave towards the end of the month, and I will spend some time in Paris. I have to see you, my very best friend there, whom I have completely lost sight of. I wrote to the Polish people once, I think in response of 2 amused letters, and I'm also requiring a correspondence from you. I suppose, having to take up a pen, that in the future I will be able to use it more easily. Besides, I already written to you once, if I do remember that correctly. The British Army, however, preferably it may be the French, is without much humor. My current dream is I wear a red shirt, a red scarf, knee-high boots, to be a member of the secret aimless Chinese society in Australia. And I don't deny that there's something vampire-like in it. In the meantime, I'm rereading St. Augustine to imagine a smile from the Polish people and trying to see something in him other than a monk ignorant of humor. I'll await your response, my dear friend. Jacques Tristan Haler. To André Breton, April 29th, 1917. I'm writing to you from a former village, from a very narrow pigsty hung with blankets. I am with the English soldiers. They have advanced on the enemy party a long way here. It is very noisy. That's it. I'm glad to know you're ill, my dear friend. Nothing kills a man like being obliged to represent a country. And then you ask me for a definition of humor. It is in the essence of symbols to be symbolic. Example, you know the horrible life of the alarm clock. It is a monster that has always terrified me because of the numbers of things its eyes project, and the way in which this honest man stares at me when I enter the room. Why then does it have so much humor? Why then? But there you have it. It is thus, and not otherwise. Jacques Vaché. Please tell the Polish people that I want to write to them. And above, don't let them just leave without leaving an address. André Breton, the 5th of May, 1918. Excuse, my dear Breton, the lack of focus on all this. I'm rather unwell. Live in a godforsaken hole between the stumps of charred trees, and periodically some sort of shell drags itself across parabolic and coughs. I exist with an American officer who I learned about the war, chews gum and sometimes amuses himself. I narrowly escape him, and this last retreat, but I object to being killed in time of war. I spend most of my days walking in unseemly places, from where I see beautiful explosions. And when I'm at the rear, often in public house, where I like to take my meals, I'm rather lamentable on what can be done about it. No, thank you, dear friend, very much. I am nothing ready at the moment. Your friend, Jacques Vaché. To André Breton, December 19th, 1918. My dear André, I would like to see you again. How I envy you for being in Paris and being able to mystify people who are worth it. Here I am in Brussels, once again in my dear atmospheres of tango around 3 o'clock in the morning, of marvelous industries, in front of some monstrous double straw cocktail and some bloody smile. I am working on funny drawings with help of colored pencils of cross-grained papers and noting pages or something. I don't really know what. Do you know that I no longer know where I am? You were talking to me about state action. Character, remember, you specified them. Then about drawing on wood on your poems. Could it be delayed? Excuse me for misunderstanding your last syllable letter. What do you deem of me, my dear friend Amour? My dear friend André? It's not a small matter. This isn't just any neo-naturalism. Would you mind, when you can, enlighten me a little more? However, naturally, I rely on you to prepare the ways of this disappointing God. A little snaring. In any case, terrible. I received your letter multiple paste-up cutouts, which filled me with satisfaction. It is beautiful, but it's missing some abstract of railway timetables, don't you think? Are you in Paris for a while? I plan to be there in about a month, and I'll see you there, at all cost. Your friend, Harry James. November 26th, 1918. White Hackline, all of you, my beautiful whiskies, my horrible yellow dripping mixture. Parmesan jar, my green character, citrin, soft flour, mauve rose, fium. Augustus vomica, nuts of uncertainty of syrup. I am a mosquist. Say, waiter, you're a damn fraud, are you? Look at these bloody aspices of this imperial oysters. Its sunken eye looks at me like an automatic pot. The bartender perhaps looking at me, pouched under the eyeballs, purring the iridescence in a layer in the rainbow. Or the man with the dead fish head lets his wet cigar hang with Scottish waistcoat. The officer adorned with crosses, the soft woman powdered white. Yawn, sucking their hair lotion. This for love. The creature had been dancing since 9 o'clock, sir. How fat it must be. This is eroticism, you see. Alcohol's amended true blood, sleepy, decent, proud, loud, flame, flame, flame. Harry James. The night on the 5th to 6th of January, Jack and his friend went to a hotel room. Jack bought opium. They smoked narcotics and they ingested it. There was only 3 left in the hotel room. Bonnet, Jack, and Vonov, an American soldier. The latter woke in the afternoon and realized that Bonnet had died, and Jack was in a worrying state. He would die, despite the doctors. This death had a tremendous effect on Breton. He didn't want to accept that he died. All the letters, all the stories, all the dying alone is boring beyond words. Preferably I would die with one of my best friends, especially when one remembers that Jacques Vaché did not die alone. One of his friends was the victim of the poison. But to admit that this double death was consequence of a sinister plan means making the memory of one of these men terribly responsible. To trigger the disclosure of this terrible responsibility was most certainly the supreme ambition of Jacques Vaché.